What's good, guys? My name's Adam Lewis. I'm a mixing and mastering engineer who specializes in hip-hop and all of the urban genres. Welcome to the second episode of my mix breakdown series, where I'll be walking you through some of my favorite and most popular mixes. Today, I'll be showing you how I mix Jafro, Pop Smoke.
I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors, lock load. I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors, lock load.
This song appeared on Jafro's Pepper Pot EP. I actually did all of the mixing and mastering for this project, which came out last year and has done pretty decent numbers on streaming platforms. The track's produced by Priv and was recorded at HQ Recordings in Leicester before being sent to me for mixing. As I'm still kind of easing my way in with these videos, I'm selecting tracks which are not too complex or intricate, but hoping to step it up with each episode. So if you've not already seen the first video, which was a Kamikaze song, please do go and check that out, and you'll see that that song is a little bit more simple than this one, but hopefully I can still break this one down in a way that's easy enough to follow. With that being said, let's dive into Logic and get started. So as you can see here, I'm mixing the beat from stems and then the vocals from stems. There's not a whole lot of vocals going on, but there's quite a bit going on with the beat, so we're going to start with that. So I'm going to start by showing you how the beat sounded when it came to me. So this is without any leveling or any plugins. All my plugins are bypassed here. So I'm going to play you a part of the verse and then a part of the chorus just to get a feel for how it sounded. So that's the verse part, and this is the chorus part. So hopefully there you get a feel of how the beat sounded. I will do a before and after at the end, so you'll be able to kind of compare and contrast, but that's how the beat sounded when it came to me. So the first things that really jumped out to me is that it's obviously a very kick and bass driven beat. The main drivers of the beat are the kick in conjunction with the 808s. So when it comes to mixing a beat, I think it's important to identify the things that are really driving the track. And in this case, it's clearly the kick and this percussion loop. As well as the 808s and bass. In fact, for the verses, sometimes they're the only things that are playing. So it was important for me to really enhance and drive those elements of the mix and make them as clean and as popping as possible in order to really push the track out. In the chorus, various instruments come in, mostly some flutes come in. As well as that piano melody there. So obviously important to make the chorus pop with those elements, but for the most part, I wanted to make sure the drums really pushed through. So I'm back with my finished mix now, and I just wanted to break down first how I sort of separated the beat into certain elements. So you see here, I've created various summing tracks. I've got a drum sum, a bass sum, and an instrument sum. And I like to do this because it allows you to kind of group tracks together and then process them as a whole, as well as individually. So all of these drum elements are all outputting to this sum. And on that, I can put certain plugins on there which process the whole thing together. And it's good with drums because you can add some compression and really push them through as a whole rather than just individually. So as I said, I've got a drum sum, a bass sum, and an instrument sum. So we'll start with the drums, and this is how the drums ended up sounding once I'd finished with them. So the main things we'll focus on is just the kick and these baile drums, where it's like the percussion loop. And then I'll show what I did on the kind of overall sum as well. So the only thing I'm actually doing to the kick as an individual channel is I'm pushing up here with an EQ. I'm adding 3 dB at 60 Hertz. So 60 Hertz is kind of one of those magic numbers when it comes to kicks. If you really want your kick to thump in the low end, that's usually the number that's nice to boost. And then I'm doing a little mid-range boost here as well, which probably just helps to add some more snap and click to the kick. So I'll play you before and after. So this is without. So you can see a lot more low end coming through and a little bit more presence as well. Now onto the percussion loop here. What I'm using on here is Virtual Mix Rack by Slate. Various different plugins within it. First of all, some saturation from the virtual channel. Using this EQ here to just boost some high end. Another EQ boosting more high end. And then I'm driving it into this FG stress. And it's adding a little bit of distortion. And then a little bit of shimmer here on revival. So let me play with and without. So quite subtle, but just adding some nice top end and a little bit more clickiness to it. And then after that, I'm driving it into the DBX 160 by Waves. Doing parallel compression here, so you see the mix knob is down, which means that I'm sort of compressing heavily, and then I'm actually reducing it by blending it in with the original. So I'll bypass both and play it with both. So I think you can hear, it is quite subtle, but it's really just adding a little bit more click, a little bit more clarity to those overall. I'm going to skip going through everything else because I think the other things are pretty straightforward. But what I'll do is show you what I did on the drum sum channel, which is the sort of overall processing on the whole thing as a whole. So I'm using the Waves EQP 1A to add more low end at 100 Hertz and also some high end at 12K. Let me play you before and after. Yeah, so really adding more and more and more thump. There just needed to be more thump. And then I'm using here the MoTT by Slate. This is a little secret weapon. So if you don't use this plugin, give it a go. So it's really just adding a lot of compression and expansion as well, and just bringing it up in all areas. So it really adds a nice finishing touch. And that's all I did for the drums. Now with the bass, there's two elements. There's the 808 bass. And as you can see, all I've done is just boosted a little low mid and low on that. And then the sub bass really complements it and drives the super low end below that. So if you don't have headphones or reasonably big speakers, you might not be able to hear that sub bass. But with that, I added the Slate Digital virtual tape machine. and boosted it down here as well. So I'll play that with and without. Yeah, so it just helped to add even more bottom end to what was already there. And then I've got on the bass sum, I'm using the MoTT again with this preset, bass round. So as you can see, it's adding even more nice rounded low end to what was already there. So on the drums and the bass is where I did most of the work on this beat. The instruments sounded really nice as they were. It's pretty much just some leveling and some panning that I did. But let me play those all together for you to hear. So with the instruments, I'm not going to go through one by one because it was really quite straightforward what I did. Just some simple leveling, a little bit of panning. But I'll play it before and after so you can get a sense of how it sounded and what it became. So all of that EQ was really just removing mud. You know, when you've got a bass heavy song like this, so we've got the strong elements of the 808 bass and the sub bass really pushing the low end. I really don't want sort of low end rumble going on in any pianos or any instruments because it will really just clutter up the low end. So it's good to kind of decide early what elements of the mix are providing your low end for you and go with it. So for me on this track, it was all about the bass. And for most songs like this and hip hop or urban songs in general, it's always good to have the bass line really driving the low end as well as the kick. But the bass line is the most important thing with the low end. So for me, as you can see here, I'm kind of filtering out low mids and super low end down here in order to just let the bass occupy that space in the mix. Also added some panning here to these channels just to kind of provide more space and width. How much time is spent on mixing an instrumental from stems is really dependent on how the beat comes to you, you know. If the producer has used good sounds and has mixed it relatively well, then most of the time there's not too much work to do. So on this one, that was really the case. It's just about kind of enhancing and emphasizing the good elements of the mix, like the kick, the bass line, and that kind of percussion loop that's there. For me, they were the highlights and they were the parts that I really wanted to hone in on and make sure that they came across really well in the mix. So what I'm going to do now is just play you a section of the verse and a section of the chorus fully mixed so you can see how that sounds. And that's the instrumental. Now, when it comes to vocals on this song, there's not a huge amount. You've got basically the main verse vocals, which are here. There's some ad-libs here, which kind of go throughout the whole song. There's some verse background vocals and some fill-in vocals here. And then there's two parts to the chorus. So I'm going to start by walking you through what I did with the main vocals and how I treated them. But I want to start by explaining a little something first. So as you'll see over here, I've got some bits and pieces on the actual vocal track itself, and then I'm outputting all of these vocals to bus 2, and that's my verse vocal bus. which is here. And then I've got more things going on here. I've got some plugins on here, and I've got some sends on here for some delays and reverbs and things like that. So this is the way I like to mix vocals nowadays. I like to sort of have small amount of processing going on each individual channel, and then send those to a bus where I can kind of group certain vocals together. Like for example, I've got 2 channels here which are pretty much the same thing. So there's no reason for me to doubly process those. You know, I can send both out to the same bus and do most of my compression and send into effects and things like that from that bus. So I hope that makes sense. Let me know in the comments if that doesn't make sense, and I'll explain it further. But it's basically just explaining to you the routing of the buses and how I sort of set up this project before mixing. So I'm going to show you quickly what I did on the actual channel itself, although that's less important than what I did on the bus. So let me play you this with nothing on it first of all.
Peas can get yum like a meal of food. I wanna try get rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew. I like.
So that's with nothing at all. Now, the first thing that I noticed on these vocals is there was a little bit of mouth noise going on, sort of pops and clicks coming from the artist's mouth, and that happens a lot. And the perfect tool to get rid of that is this. It's from iZotope. It's called RX9 Mouth Declick, and this thing is a miracle worker. So I'll play it with it, and without it you may not be able to hear what it's doing, but trust me, it's doing it.
I wanna try get rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster. I wanna try get rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew.
So on that particular part, maybe there isn't too many clicks that it's getting rid of, but overall it just really helps to clean up the vocal, and I use that on a lot of vocals. There's not really any downside to using it as long as you don't have the sensitivity too high. Next is a simple EQ that's simply just rolling off the rumble and the low end on the vocal.
I wanna try get rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew. I like
There probably isn't really any on this one, but that's just sort of general good practice to roll off on the low end there. Next is the R compressor by Waves. Still my favorite vocal compressor, really. And that will be doing sort of the primary little bit of compression on the channel.
Or it's Cali with the Callaloo Patty, man. She's calling my phone and she's calling me papi, and I think she wanna get jiggy with the jaggy, so I.
So as you can see, hardly anything at all. It's just kind of kissing it, just helping to control the first kind of peaks. And we'll get on later to my full vocal compression on this bus here. After that, Waves de-esser, doing the first de-essing. There's 2 de-essers in this chain in total, but this is the first de-esser.
I wanna try get rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew. I like parties with weed and food. That's where I skank and you'll see man move.
Pretty subtle at this point, but it's just taking off a nice little bit of the sibilance there. So the next thing, we're going on to the bus now, and this virtual mix rack is on my verse bus. Now this is doing most of the heavy lifting of the overall tonality and compression of the main vocal. So in here we've got various different elements. So we've got the virtual channel, which is basically sort of an emulation of vintage mixing boards.
I wanna try get rich so I can show.
So let me turn all of these off so you can hear just what each one's doing. Now the effect of this first plugin here is very subtle.
So I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew. I like parties with weed and food. That's where I skank and you.
Next in the chain is the FGN, which is the EQ. I'm not doing a whole lot, as you can see here, really just adding a high shelf up here to add some sparkle.
That's where I skank and you'll see man move. Pardon? Now we heard you. Food. I wanna try get rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew.
Next in the chain here is the FG Stress, and I'm not even compressing with this. All I'm doing is using it to add some of this harmonic distortion.
Stew. I like parties with weed and food. That's where I skank and you'll see man move. Pardon? Now we heard you. You just didn't use P's and Q's. It's either the greenest tangerine dream or the amnesia in my reefer. If anybody.
So it's adding a lot of level to the signal as well. Next, we've got the first compressor on this bus, which is the FG116.
If anybody wanna speak, then speak up. Exactly, they didn't speak up. Or it's Cali with the Callaloo Patty, man. She's calling my phone and she's calling me Papi, and I think she wanna get jiggy with the jaggy, so I.
So you'll hear when that comes in, the vocal becomes a lot more tame and controlled. And then after that, we've got the FG2A, which is doing more compression on the vocal.
Meal of food. I wanna try get rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew. I like parties with weed and food. That's where I skank and you'll see man move. Pardon? No.
Yeah, so those two compressors combined really worked on this song. I like to use two compressors sometimes. Obviously, there's kind of three compressors because we had the R compressor on the actual channel as well. But that wasn't really doing much. These two are doing the heavy lifting. And then after that, we've got Revival by Slate.
I get rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew. I like parties with weed and food. That's where I skank and you'll see man move.
Now, as you can hear, that's adding a lot of sort of high-end sparkle or shimmer in this case. So we have to tame that after that with another de-esser. And for that, I'm using the E2 de-esser. This is my favorite vocal de-esser these days. Really nice, really surgical, but quite clean and transparent as well. And I like that it's got the dry wet knob here, so you can kind of dial it in and then dial it back. So let me show you before and after of what that's doing.
Try get rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew. Try get rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew. I like parties with weed and food. That's where I skank and you'll see man move. Pardon? Now we heard you. You just didn't use P's and Q's. It's either the greenest tangerine dream or the amnesia.
So that's the main processing on those main vocals of the verses. After that, we come down here to the actual sends and the effects. So the first effect on these vocals is an 1/8 note delay. I'm using the simple Logic Echo for that. But then I'm also sidechaining the actual vocals into it so that it only really pokes up in between words.
Can get yum like a meal of food. I wanna try get rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew. I like parties with weed and food. That's where I skank and you'll see man move.
So after that, I'm actually adding something called Ring Shifter, which is a Logic plugin, but it's kind of adding a sort of spacey sort of stereo effect onto the delay. Now, this will be very subtle, but it will just add some kind of width and depth to the actual delay in the background.
Pardon? Now we heard you. Either the greenest tangerine dream or the amnesia in my reefer. If anybody wanna speak, then speak up.
And then after that, we've got a reverb to kind of soften that.
Then speak up. Or it's Cali with the Callaloo Patty, man. She's calling my phone and she's calling me Papi, and I think she wanna get jiggy with the jaggy, so I bought.
Now these things are pretty subtle, and the delay itself is quite subtle and low in the mix, but it just adds some nice atmosphere and sort of, you know, some space and some depth to the mix overall, to the vocals overall. Now, as well as that delay, we've also got a slap delay on this vocal as well. For that, I'm using the Repeater by Slate. So let me play that without the other effect on, so you'll just be hearing the main vocal and the slap.
All of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew. I like parties with weed and food. That's where I skank and you'll see man move. Pardon? Now we heard you. You just didn't use P's and Q's. It's
So I always like a slap delay on a rap vocal. Timing is 166 milliseconds. Pretty simple. And then after that, we've got a slight reverb on these vocals as well. And for that, I'm using the Verb Suite by Slate.
rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew. I like parties with weed and food. That's where I skank and you'll see man move. Pardon? Now we...
So in solo, you can hear it quite a bit, but within the mix, it's not really coming through too strong. So I'll play the vocal now with no effects, no delays, no reverbs, and then I'll switch the reverbs and effects on. It's these three buses here.
Either the greenest tangerine dream or the amnesia in my reefer. If anybody wanna speak, then speak up. Exactly, they didn't speak up. Or it's Cali with the Callaloo Patty, man. She's calling my phone and she's calling me Papi, and I think she wanna get jiggy with the jaggy, so I bought a Maggie for the link and meter.
So let me play you the verse in the context of the song so you can get a feel for how it sounds after everything was done.
Either the greenest tangerine dream or the amnesia in my reefer. If anybody wanna speak, then speak up. Exactly, they didn't speak up. Or it's Cali with the Callaloo patty, man. She's calling my phone and she's calling me papi, and I think she wanna get jiggy with the jaggy, so I bought a Maggie for the link and meter. I was in it.
So we'll move on to the chorus vocals now, and as you can see, we've kind of got like a call and response type situation going on here. So we've got 3 layers of each. So let me play you how it sounds now, fully mixed, so you can get a feel for what's going on.
I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Lock load. I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Lock load. It's the
So I'm going to use this first vocal here to kind of demonstrate what I did with this vocal, because the other 2 channels are pretty much the same but just panned left and right. So first of all, I've got Waves Tune on here, which is sort of an auto tune equivalent. It's not doing a whole lot, as you'll hear. Let me take everything off and just play it with this.
I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke.
It's kind of adding a slight little smoothness or a little digital touch to it, which I liked. It's subtle, but it works. And then after that, we've got a bit of a boost here in the mid-range.
I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke.
And then again, pretty much the same as I showed you on the verse vocal. We've got the Waves compressor, our compressor, and we've got the Waves de-esser.
I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Lock load.
And then when I combine that with the other 2 layers, which are here, one's panned 30% left, one's panned 30% right.
I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Lock load. I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke.
Now that's the processing that I did on the actual 3 channels for that chorus part. And then these go out to bus 3, which is my main chorus bus. So I'll show you the processing that I'm doing on that bus.
I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Lock load.
So as you can see, quite similar to before, some slight EQ touches here. I'm not actually using this FG116 on this chorus. I'm only using the FG2A, and it's doing quite a lot of reduction, if you can see that.
I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Lock load.
So let me play with and without this.
I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke.
So you see how much it's really pushing that through. Next, we've got the de-esser again. I'm not going to go through exactly what I did because it's pretty much the same as the rap vocal. As you can see, there's quite a bit less de-essing going on, but still similar. And then I've actually added a slight reverb here using the Valhalla plate. I think I like choruses to be a little bit wetter sometimes than rap vocals. Kind of just helps to bring out more space in the choruses.
I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Lock load. I was.
You see, that's quite strong on there. And then I'm also sending this to the same 3 buses that I was sending the verse vocal to. So let me show you how it sounds with those 3 on.
I was in the clubs when I first had Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Lock load.
So the other kind of fill-in part of the chorus goes like this.
Baby, crazy, maybe.
So I did quite a bit different processing on this. So I won't go through what I did on the actual channels because as you see, it follows pretty much the same pattern that I've shown you on all the other channels. The only difference is here, I've done hard left and hard right panning on 2 of the vocals. So one is centered, one is hard left, one is hard right. Very similar in here. Let me turn everything else off apart from this.
Baby, crazy, maybe.
Yeah, so probably exactly the same processing in terms of compression on there and de-essing. Now I've added more reverb on these parts of the chorus than the first parts of the chorus that I just showed.
Baby, crazy, maybe, maybe. Baby, crazy, maybe, maybe.
So I've got a mix of 14% on there, which is quite a bit, but it's because this vocal is sort of a bit more atmospheric and a bit more kind of background. Then I'm adding the same 3 buses that I showed you on the verse and the previous part of the chorus. But then the difference that I'm doing on this part is I'm actually sending this to another bus, bus 14. And let me show you what that sounds like on its own.
Baby, crazy, maybe, maybe.
So I'm actually sending it to bus 14 down here, which is a high pitch sort of simulator, if you will. So I'm basically got a pitch shifter on here, pitching up a whole octave using Little Alter Boy. And then after that, I've got stereo widening and I've got a reverb. So let me play you this in solo on its own. So what it's doing is basically creating a duplicate of those 3 layers and pitching it up by 1 octave, and then I'm blending it in the background. And it's quite subtle in the mix, but I think it kind of helps to distinguish between those parts and the normal parts of the chorus, if you will.
I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke.
Baby,
I dropped floors,
crazy,
lock load.
maybe, maybe.
I was in the clubs when I first heard.
So hopefully that covers how I mixed the verse and the chorus vocals for this song. The other thing I wanted to show was the ad-libs. Now, these ad-libs actually came to me already processed. They already had sort of a radio filter applied to them. And sometimes, you know, the engineer wants to send it with that sound on it because maybe the artist requested that he wanted it to sound like that, and that's fine. So all I've done, I've added the mouth declick to it as I showed you on the main vocal, just to remove any clicks. I've done a little bit of EQ and I've dipped it here because I thought that it was a little bit sharp in that area. And then I've sent that to another bus here where I'm doing some smoothing out, some de-essing. I'm also doing some compression. And then I've added a reverb to it, and I've also sent it to all those same effect buses that I sent all the other vocals to. So let me play you with nothing on it, and then I'll play you with everything on it. Now with the plugins. Now they do sound kind of crazy on their own, but in the context of the song, they do work and they add some kind of excitement and a little bit more kind of hype to the song.
I drop floors, crazy, lock load. I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I drop floors, crazy, lock load. I was in.
And that really covers the main parts of this song. Now there are some other parts like these fill-in vocals here in the last verse.
You get barbecue, but I just want to grip a saucepan and sauce it up. I was young when I first dropped mad flows. Wavy, still got those. Lately, won't stop today. Make me, no.
But I've really just used the same kind of processing that I used on the chorus for those parts. So I don't want to go into it and make the video too long. Just refer back to how I treated the vocals in the choruses if you want to know how I made these parts really pop out. Basically by using panning, heavy compression, and some reverb and delays and things like that. So I guess the last thing to show is my mastering chain for this song. And what I'm going to do is take off all the plugins apart from the one that I'm showing you and sort of build the chain like that. You are going to hear that the track dips down in level because obviously there's some limiters and things involved. So I will try and turn the song up so that I'm kind of level matching, but you will hear some increases in level as I'm adding these plugins on because that's kind of what the aim is in the mastering process. So the first thing that I've added is this Abbey Road TG Mastering Suite by Waves. So let me show you before and after on that. I'll play the chorus for this part.
I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Load. I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. Drop floors. Load. I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors.
So that didn't add any level because I've actually reduced the level after I've boosted it, but this is basically just adding a little bit of glue compression to the mix. Very subtle. Next in the chain is the iMac EQ200. And all I'm doing on this is I'm adding 2 dB at the real super low end. And I'm adding a little bit of the high end, a little bit in the mids as well. I'm also adding some stereo width. Let me take off the stereo width and just show you what the EQ sounds like. And then I'll show you what the width does.
I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Load. I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Load.
Yeah, so it's just adding some real super lows. Again, if you're not listening in headphones or on nice size studio monitors, you may not be able to hear what that's doing. Now let me show you what the width does. So I had this on about 125.
I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Load. I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Load. I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop.
Quite subtle, but just adds to the overall width of the mix. Next in the chain, I'm using MoTT by Slate Digital. This should be sort of really gluing the mix together and making it really stand out using compression and expansion.
I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Load. I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Load. I was in the...
So I think it really kind of adds some excitement to the mix. It's not doing a huge amount that's really in your face, but it just helps to bring out elements within the mix that are pleasing to the ear, you know. Next in the chain is my first limiter, which is Limitless by DMG Audio, and this will be adding a lot of level, as you can see, taking down 6.6 dB here, so this will add a lot of level.
I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Load. I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke.
So that limiter's doing most of the heavy lifting when it comes to bringing up the level of this song. And as you can see, it's bringing down a good...
I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke.
You know, it's doing about 4 to 5 dB of gain reduction, but I don't feel like it's really badly impacting on the overall sound. After that, we've got the final part of the chain, which is the Ozone 9 Maximizer limiter. And that's bringing down another 1.5 dB and also lowering the ceiling to minus 0.5.
I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Load. I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. I dropped floors. Load.
So overall, it just really helps to push the song up and out. And some of that stuff I do as I'm mixing. It's not all done sort of at the final step. I like to mix with some level of limiting on my master bus, because otherwise I don't get real sense of how the song feels and how it's going to feel once it's mastered. So some of those things I would do during mixing, and some of them I do at the end of the mix. Let me play part of the verse now instead and show you a before and after with no plugins on the mastering bus, and then all the plugins on the master bus. So this is without anything.
Ready if I cook him up, man could serve corn buttered up on a cup. If you get him a grills, you get barbecue. But I just wanna grip a saucepan. I was young when I first dropped mad flows. Wavy, still got those. Lately, won't stop today. Make me, no. And I don't even care if nobody rates me. Them man are lazy. But if you got dough, pay me, oh yeah. I was in the clubs when I first Pop Smoke. I dropped flows. I was in the clubs when I first Pop Smoke.
So not a very smooth before and after with that, because obviously as each plugin comes in, it's kind of cutting the audio as it kind of buffers into the plugin. But as you can see, a lot of level being added there, but also a little bit more clarity and a bit more punch as well.
MCs can get yum like a meal of food. I wanna try get rich so I can show all of the gang what peas can do. I want lobster, not no beef and stew. I like parties with weed and food. That's where I skank and you'll see man move. Pardon? Now we heard you. You just didn't use P's and Q's. It's either the greenest tangerine dream or the amnesia in my reefer. If anybody wanna speak, then speak up. Exactly, they didn't speak up. Or it's Cali with the Callaloo patty, man. She's calling my phone and she's calling me papi, and I think she wanna get jiggy with the jaggy, so I bought a Maggie for the link and meter. I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. Baby, I dropped floors. Crazy. Lock load. Baby. I was in the clubs when I first heard Pop Smoke. Baby, I dropped floors. Crazy. Lock load. Baby. It's the return of the prodigal son.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed the second installment of this mix breakdown series. I'm still learning as I go, still learning the best way to present this, and open to suggestions from you guys. So please do leave any feedback in the comments and I will get back to you and take anything on board. Please check out my website if you're interested in any of my services, or follow me on Instagram. I'll leave all the details for the song and the artist in the description below, as well as all my contact details. And I hope to see you on the next one. Please do subscribe to keep up to date with all my latest videos. And until next time, peace.